Welcome back, everyone. Today I'm going to be ranking Martin Scorsese's films, at least the ones that I've seen so far. There are a couple I haven't seen yet. I'm also not going to be ranking any of his documentary style films. It's going to be just his feature films. I've only seen 22 of them. Only, that's pretty much all of them. So I'm going to start at 22 and then work my way to the top of the list. This is basically going to be kind of just my subjective rankings. I would try to do an objective rankings, but they're different for everyone, really. Like, you can't separate the subjectivity of ranking movies without, it's just impossible to kind of give a completely objective view without angering anyone, because some people have Taxi Driver number one, some people have Raging Bull number one, some people have Goodfellas number one, and honestly, those are all valid takes. None of those are number one for me, but I'll get to that. Kicking it off at number 22, I have Bringing Out the Dead, which is a film that I don't think a ton of people have seen. It's one of the rare films that has Martin Scorsese directing it and Nicolas Cage acting in it. I think it's the only Scorsese film Nick Cage has been in, but it's just kind of interesting seeing, one of the greatest directors of all time matched up with, some would argue, one of the best actors of all time. Others would argue one of the worst actors of all time. I think that's what makes Nick Cage interesting. Unfortunately, this film isn't that interesting. It's pretty forgettable from what I remember, and I don't have a ton to say about it, so that's why it's at the bottom of my list. Next up, I have New York, New York. This one also could have went to the bottom of my list. It's a bit long. It's about a saxophonist, so if you are into jazz, you might actually really like this film. Also has Robert De Niro in it, one of the first times that they teamed up. So if you're like a completionist, you want to see every single Martin Scorsese film, yeah, you kind of have to watch this one. Or if you're into jazz, it might be up your alley, but for the most part, a little bit too long and a little bit boring. The next up is Age of Innocence at 20, I think. And this one is actually starring Daniel Day-Lewis, which is an actor that I wish Martin Scorsese would have teamed up more with over his career, but, that's how it goes. And Age of Innocence, unfortunately, again, not a super memorable film, but it is a good film. There's a reason why there's two films lower than it. It is really solid. I'd say it is pretty underrated. I'd tell people to go check it out just for Daniel Day-Lewis's amazing acting, and then, of course, Scorsese. Even at his worst, Scorsese's making films that would be in other directors' catalogs pretty good. So next up is The Color of Money. This is a notable favorite of Joe Rogan's because of the pool. I also am a pretty big pool fan, but I'm not that great at it. It's kind of interesting that the two biggest pool movies ever made, pool is in billiards, just for anybody out there who might be confused, the two biggest billiards pool movies that have ever been made, The Hustler and The Color of Money, both star Paul Newman, which is kind of funny. Must be a pretty good pool player. Anyways, Color of Money at number 19. It's a really fun movie. I just personally prefer The Hustler, and I think it's, again, just one of the weaker movies in Scorsese's catalog. At number 18, I believe I have Hugo. Now, here's where we're starting to get to the underrated films that I think you guys should go check out if you haven't seen them. If you haven't seen Hugo, I highly recommend it. I saw it in theaters when did this film come out? 2011, so I was 11 years old. And this film really got me into the history of film. It was the first film that kind of went over the history of film. So if you haven't seen the film, spoiler alert, minor spoiler alert. If you have, this film kind of goes over, what's his name? The famous French director. I forget his name, but he's like the most popular French director ever. It kind of goes over Méliès, I think, kind of his early films and how film kind of started back way in like the 1910s, 1920s. And it's also a fun adventure film at the same time. I kind of forget how the plot goes because I haven't seen it in a while, but I just remember watching this film and getting hooked on the history of film and watching older films. Next up, I got Mean Streets. Again, an underrated Scorsese film. You got De Niro in it, a bunch of other Italian actors who you would recognize their face but probably not recognize their names. But this is also another great gangster film, kind of what Scorsese's been labeled as like a gangster. Oh, he only makes gangster movies. Well, when you got films like Gangs of New York, Mean Streets, The Departed, Casino. He has made a lot. I'll give you that, but he's definitely more than just a gangster director, and we'll see that as we get through this list. But Mean Streets probably his lowest ranking gangster movie for me. It is good, it's just not as entertaining as the other films on this list. I believe I'm at number 17 or 16. I should have kept track of this, but The Aviator's up next. I believe this is the first time Scorsese linked up with Leonardo DiCaprio. So over Scorsese's career, he's kind of had two main men who he's kind of always gone to play his leading roles, and that's been De Niro and then eventually DiCaprio. And then in the recent Killers of the Flower Moon, we actually got both of them in the same film. So, yeah, the first team up between Scorsese and Leo was quite fun. I think it's kind of underrated in the fact that it was like a big budget, big screen kind of movie. It almost felt like a Spielberg type movie. Every time I go back and see that Martin Scorsese directed The Aviator, I'm always like, wasn't that Spielberg? Anyways, underrated film. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. Next up, this is where we get into I think the really, really good films on his catalog. After Hours, I have up next. Really underrated film. I don't want to give too much away about it because I think it's better if you go into After Hours not knowing anything about the film. In fact, it's best to go into most films like that, but go check out After Hours if you haven't. It's a bit earlier in Scorsese's career, but I think it's a very, very solid film. Next up, I got The Last Temptation of Christ. People forget about this one too because we have The Passion with Mel Gibson and Jim Caviezel playing Jesus Christ, but some people forget that William Dafoe also played Jesus Christ. And The Last Temptation of Christ is pretty solid telling. I do prefer The Passion a little bit more, but it is a very solid film, and William Dafoe he kills it in everything that he's in. So Last Temptation of Christ. After that, I have Cape Fear. This is a personal favorite of mine. If you kind of just want to get into Scorsese, dip your toes into the water, I think Cape Fear is honestly probably a good pick because it's pretty accessible. It gets your heart pounding right from the beginning and keeps that throughout the whole film. It's a intense thriller. It can be dark at times, but it's not egregious. It's not like a Saw film, but it is a darker film. And I think it's one of De Niro's best performances for sure. Nick Nolte also is in this. I forgot about that. He's terrific in this film. Cape Fear, a lot of fun. Also, go watch the original because it is a remake. The original is just as good. Next up, getting into, looks like the top 12 here. At number 12, I have The Irishman. I was thinking of putting this one a bit lower just because it's a tad bit forgettable. And I feel like most people raved about it for the first year it came out, and then it kind of fell off of most people's lists. I heard some people saying when this came out that it was Scorsese's best film. I didn't think that. I thought it was a little bit overdrawn, but I thought it was a perfect kind of capstone to finish off his career. I thought he was actually going to end on this film because it's a gangster film, kind of how he started out, and kind of has all the main actors that he's worked with over his career in one film. I just thought that was a nice bow on the end of his career, but sure enough, he came out with an even better film a couple of years later, Killers of the Flower Moon. We'll get to that. So yeah, I got The Irishman at 12. It's just a bit long. I know that that's the point of the film, and it benefits from actually being long, but as far as going back and rewatching it, I feel like I might be more inclined to go back and rewatch Killers of the Flower Moon, which is, I think, longer than The Irishman. But I don't know if I need to rewatch The Irishman, and that's my problem with it. So that's why it's a little bit lower, but still a fantastic film. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. It's amazing for a first watch. Next up, I got Gangs of New York. This is a favorite amongst a lot of my friends. A lot of my friends put this film pretty high on their Scorsese's list. I'm not the biggest fan of it. I think it's a little bit all over the place. Just the way that the story's put together, and kind of has all the main actors that he's worked with over his career in one film. I just don't know if I need to rewatch The Irishman. And that's my problem with it. So that's why it's a little bit lower, but still a fantastic film. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. It's amazing for a first watch. Next up, I got Gangs of New York. This is a favorite amongst a lot of my friends. A lot of my friends put this film pretty high on their Scorsese's list. I'm not the biggest fan of it. I think it's a little bit all over the place. Just the way that the story's put together, and I know like the costumes and the set are supposed to feel like that, but it's a little bit disorientating at times watching this film. You're like, is this really a Scorsese film? I don't know. I don't know how to describe my feelings with it, but I'm not the biggest on this film, although Daniel Day-Lewis, amazing. Leonardo DiCaprio, amazing. Everybody's amazing in this film. The action's pretty great. I think Liam Neeson also is in this. Yeah, he's also pretty good in this. Yeah, Gangs of New York, some people might have it higher. I got it at 11. Getting into the top 10. At number 10, another personal favorite, I have Shutter Island. I think that this is kind of similar to Cape Fear, or it's kind of it's a bit similar to Cape Fear. It goes a little bit in a more supernatural route, I guess. If you haven't seen the film, I don't want to spoil Shutter Island for you, but if there's one film not to spoil on Scorsese's list, it's probably Shutter Island, because it has quite the ending, and I really appreciate that. It's a film that I look back and I forget that this is directed by Scorsese, of all people, because it doesn't exactly feel like a Scorsese film, but it is a dark, intense thriller and a mind-bending film. And if you guys know anything about me, I love mind-bending films. So Shutter Island at 10. At number 9, I have King of Comedy. I really like this film because I was turned on to it around the same time as Taxi Driver, and I just became a big fan of De Niro at that point. I went and watched Raging Bull and Cape Fear, and basically all of his films have been with Scorsese. That's not true, but a lot of them have been. I went through and watched all of De Niro's stuff, and King of Comedy always stuck in my mind as a film that should have been remade. I know that sounds weird in retrospect now, but I always kind of thought like this film could be done really well by a different director. I just really liked the concept of a talk show host kind of going insane, or an aspiring comedian. And eventually this film was kind of remade in The Joker. The Joker with Joaquin Phoenix, as many of you may know, draws a lot from the King of Comedy. It even takes Robert De Niro and kind of puts him in a similar role as one of the characters in King of Comedy. So it draws a lot from that movie, and I would say it's kind of a remake, even though it's a Joker film. But yeah, King of Comedy is great. If you guys haven't gone back and rewatched it, if you're a fan of the Joker, I'm sure you'll like it. So put King of Comedy higher on your list and go watch it. Getting into the top 8, 6 of these films are always going to be in Scorsese's top 5, top 10 lists. Anywhere you look, everybody's going to have these films up there. The ordering might change, like I mentioned earlier. I know some people who think Goodfellas is his best film. Some people think it's The Departed. Some people think it's Raging Bull. Some people think it's Wolf of Wall Street. And the order for me changes all the time. But for now, this is the order I'm going to go with. At number 8, I'm going to put The Wolf of Wall Street. Just because every time I go to rewatch it, I stop and I rewatch something else. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I always want to rewatch The Wolf of Wall Street, but I never do because I remember it so well. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but a funny story with this film is I went to go see it with a buddy of mine when it came out in theaters. So, this came out, 2013. I was 13 years old, and the ticket guy asked my dad if he really wanted to let me see it. So that was already one sign. So we go in, me, my buddy, and my dad. And, if you've seen the film, you know how it starts. And yeah, basically most F-bombs ever in a movie. We get to the end of it. We all think it's awesome. My buddy goes home and my dad gets a call a day later and gets chewed out by my buddy's friend for my dad bringing us to see that movie. Because I don't know if I should have seen that at 13, but I remember watching the trailers for it before it came out and really wanting to see it. And it was a lot of fun when I was 13. I don't know how it would age for me now. That's why I have it at number 8. At number 7, I have The Departed. I only put this here because I like Infernal Affairs better. I just truly do. I know that the acting in The Departed is probably better. How can you beat that cast? It's one of the best casts ever in film history. But for me, I don't know what it is. I just like Infernal Affairs better. For those of you who don't know, The Departed is a remake of Infernal Affairs, which is I want to say Chinese film. I'm pretty sure it's a Chinese film that was made, I think, in 2000. And I like it better. It's the same story. I just think it's done a little bit better with the writing. Like I said, the acting might be better in The Departed, but that's the only reason why I put that at 7. At number 6, I have Casino. I never really was big on Casino. I rewatched it a couple times, and then it was like the third or fourth watch when it really clicked with me what he was trying to do. And then obviously visiting Vegas, that kind of helped a bit too. But yeah, I mean, most of you clicking on this video probably have seen Casino already. If you haven't, go watch it. I mean, it's like on par with Goodfellas. So Casino's fantastic. Might even deserve a rewatch soon. A lot of these films I'm going to have to rewatch soon, especially Hugo. I forget how that movie goes, but I remember being entranced when I first saw it. At number 5, I have Taxi Driver. Again, depending on the person, this film might be number 1, but for me, 5 is a good position. It is one of those films that kind of broke Scorsese onto the scene. Same with De Niro, and really kind of built the foundations for their careers. So it did a lot for both of them. It's inspired a lot of other films. Obviously, that kind of dark, shady, loner male character has been copied and pasted many times, some in very good ways, like in Drive, and some in very bad ways, like a bunch of movies I don't want to name. But anyways, I got to put Taxi Driver that high just for its influence and its impact. And the first time I saw it, I just remember going like, oh, films can be dark and the protagonist doesn't have to be a good guy. So it was an eye-opening film when I first saw it, so it'll always be kind of in that top 5 for me. At number 4, any day of the week, this could be number 1. If I rewatched it tomorrow, it probably would be number 1, but I got Raging Bull. I love the choice of going black and white. I loved that choice for The Lighthouse. I think it worked for The Artist as well. I wish more filmmakers would do it. Roma, another good example of going black and white when you don't need to. For this film, I thought it was perfect. Being a huge boxing fan, I thought the story of Jake LaMotta was really well told. Even if it wasn't 100% accurate in all the places, I thought it got the spirit of Jake down pat. So Raging Bull will always be one of my favorite movies. Now getting into the top 3, now this is where it's going to get controversial, and I do want you guys to let me know in the comments, I guess not why I'm wrong, because I already said it's kind of just my subjective taste, but why you guys would have different films in different orders if you guys were ranking Scorsese, because I put Goodfellas at number 3, and for most of my life that would have been number 1, but I moved it down to number 3, maybe for the sake of the video being interesting, I don't know, but I didn't want to put it number 1 like everybody else. Of course, Ray Liotta, his best performance easily. Probably Scorsese's most accessible film. It's super easy to watch, I find. I mean, I watched this when I was pretty young. I think I was like 12, like 11 or 12, like pretty young. And I watched this film and I found it extremely entertaining. And this is back when I was like, into Spider-Man and Star Wars and more action-y type films, but Goodfellas just grabbed me with how well written every character was. Amazing. And then of course the infamous improv scene with Joe Pesci, one of my favorite scenes in film history. If you don't know what scene that is, go watch Goodfellas. I don't know why you clicked on this video if you haven't seen Goodfellas. Go watch that. That should be at the top of your list. Anyways, number 2, I'm going to put Killers of the Flower Moon, just because I think Scorsese's done 2 films in his career that are super, super deep and important and almost humanist films. And I find that those films, those really deep films that get to the soul of what it means to be human, I guess, those films tend to be the best in my eyes. And it's not like other films in his catalog haven't done that, but I think the 2 best ones are at the top of my list. And Killers of the Flower Moon I'm putting second, just because I need to rewatch it. I need to go back. I need to see how accessible that is on a second watch. I need to see if there's anything deeper to it than what I saw on first take. I did a couple videos on Killers of the Flower Moon already. I reviewed the film. I don't think I put any spoilers in that, so if you haven't seen Killers of the Flower Moon, go check out that review. And then I also broke down one of the scenes near the end of the film that I thought was probably Scorsese's best scene he's ever made. So for those reasons, yeah, I'm going to put it at 2. I don't know how I feel about that. I'm looking at all the other films on this list, and I'm like, I like all these other films better, but I feel like Killers of the Flower Moon was a necessary film in a lot of ways. So for the sake of the video and recency bias, it's number 2. Number 1, again, going to be controversial. You might have guessed by now. I've mentioned it before, but it's going to be Silence. I think it's Scorsese's deepest film. I think it's some of the best acting he's gotten out of people. It's hard to say that because he's worked with De Niro and Leonardo DiCaprio in so many films. So it's like, how can you say that? I mean, he has so many great performances he's drawn out of actors, but I really think the performance he got out of Andrew Garfield in this film was special. And it's a film that it's not that I didn't like it when it first came out, but I don't know. I just walked away from it like somber and not really knowing what to make of it. There were scenes in it that I didn't really understand. And then it wasn't until I came back to it a couple years later and rewatched it with, a little bit more philosophy in my head. And then it really clicked for me. And when Silence clicks for you, I think it might be your favorite Scorsese film. Not to say, like, if you don't get it, I don't want to be like that, but Silence for me, I don't know, just clicks for me. It's so deep and so emotionally impactful. Amazing film. Yeah, I don't know. These rankings, like I said, could change any day. I watch one and then suddenly that goes to the top. Scorsese's hard like that. He's just made so many great films. Tarantino would be another director like that. I'm probably going to rank his films soon too. It's going to be hard because, like I said, it's just every day I change my rankings for these directors because they made so many great films, and it's hard to say you like one more than the other or one's better than the other. So I'm going to leave it at that for today. I thought I'd make this video just because Killers of the Flower Moon came out recently and Scorsese's been in the news a bit. So I thought I'd break down the films I have seen from him and kind of rank them for you guys. If you guys want me to do other directors, let me know in the comments. All these lists are on my Letterboxd. I think that's linked in my link tree. It's either on my Instagram or I might put a link in the description so you guys can go check out my Letterboxd lists. I got like 85 lists in there, 15 to 20 of which are like director rankings, like ranking the films of certain directors. So I'll probably do a few more episodes like this in the near future. But yeah, go check out my Letterboxd. I don't want to be like that guy just plugging in my Letterboxd, but I have rated, I think, around 4,000 titles on there. So if you guys are looking to get deeper into films, deeper into TV shows as well, there's some on Letterboxd. They don't have everything like IMDb, but if you guys are looking to get into stuff like that, I've made some cool lists on there. Like I have like my top war films, my top romance films, different genres like that. So if you're interested, go check it out. If not, whatever. I mean, it's my Letterboxd. We all have a Letterboxd, or maybe you don't have a Letterboxd. Go get one. If you're like watching films and you're planning on cataloging them and keeping track of them, rating them, making lists so you can either keep track of them for yourself or send them to other people. I get a lot of people into films by sending them my Letterboxd list. So go check it out if you haven't checked out Letterboxd before. It's a great app for people that are interested into movies. So I'm not sponsored by them or anything. It's just I started rambling about Letterboxd and now I can't stop. But let me conclude the video there. Thank you guys for watching so much. It means a lot. Like and subscribe, all that jazz helps boost this channel in the algorithm. And I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.